We want to embark on a discussion this morning with our guest. We're talking about leadership and also emotional intelligence, looking at the recent what has been happening lately. How will you define our leaders? Are they emotionally intelligent? And when asked to define the ideal leader, many will emphasize traits such as intelligence, toughness, determination, and vision, the qualities traditionally associated with leadership. Such skills and smarts are necessary, but insufficient qualities for the leader. Often left off the list are softer, more personal qualities, but they are also essential. Although a certain degree of analytical and technical skill is minimum requirement for success, studies indicate that emotional intelligence may be the key attribute that distinguishes outstanding performance from those who are merely adequate. And of course, that will be the basis of our discussion this morning. You can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook. And 20505 is our SMS portal. We have already our guests in studio, and we want to embark on this particular discussion right now on the Leadership Forum. As I mentioned earlier, we have with us Dr. David Ndetei, who's a professor of psychiatry at the University of Nairobi. Also, we have Dr. Wale Akinyemi, who is the CEO of Power Talks Limited. We have Dr. Caesar Mwangi, the founding director of the Center for Personal Leadership. Also, we have with us Dr. Vincent Ogutu, who's the acting deputy vice chancellor, planning and development, Strathmore University. And we have also with us Dr. Ngumi. Ngumi. She is the head of outreach and partnership at the Nest. Right, we want to get on with our discussion. A very good morning to you, gentlemen and lady.
Morning.
I didn't hear you.
Good morning. Good morning, Debarl.
Good morning to you. Right, thank you. When we talk about leadership and intelligence, or emotional intelligence, what really comes up to your mind? Let's begin with you, Professor Ndetei.
Well, I think we have three words. We've got leadership, we've got emotions, and we have intelligence.
Yes.
And I think for us to understand the total number of words, I think it's better we look at each word separately. Mm-hmm. To me, intelligence is the ability to solve problems. Intelligence is measurable, as a matter of fact. That's why we have IQ, which we measure and ranges from a certain range, minimum, to a possible maximum.
Yes.
And what is important for us and the audience to know is that intelligence is largely inherited. 70 to 80% of our intelligence is genetically determined. We have nothing to do with it. We inherited from our parents.
Yes.
And in about 25 to 20% is determined by the environment. And the environment in this context is where we have come from, how we have been socialized, our past experiences, what we might be going through now. Emotions, on the other hand, can simply be defined as feelings.
Feelings, yes.
Feelings.
Let's leave it at that,
Okay.
right? Of course, we'll have a whole weight of time to actually go through that particular concept as well. Let's hear from you, Dr. Vincent Ogutu. Emotional intelligence and leadership. What really comes up your mind?
What I think of is most people think we're just purely rational, that leaders deal with rational people. If they give them the right reasons, people will just follow. And it's as simple as that. But it's actually not that simple. We're very emotional. A lot of times we make decisions based on our emotions. So if the leader is to succeed, they have to kind of get inside these people and understand what they're going through and know which buttons to press, which ones they can or cannot press. So it's very important to know that component of people in order to be an effective leader.
Dr. Ngumi.
I guess sometimes I worry about the use of the word intelligence because it kind of locks people in an academic frame. Yes. And so it's easy for people to think that, oh, it's a thing that I need to learn, it's a thing that I need to study, when there's so much of emotional intelligence that lies within empathy and with being able to understand how people feel and be right about your projections about how another person is feeling. So are you reading the person's body language? Are you responding to their tone? Are you listening to the words that they're choosing when they speak to you? Do you even hear the language they chose when they decided that they were going to speak to you? Because we know Kenyans, and we know the way Kenyans, when they want to generate an intimacy, they will usually speak Kiswahili, or they'll speak the language that they think that you speak, so that instantly you become friends. But then sometimes when people choose to speak to you only in English, they're saying something, you see. And so the other thing that came to my mind, I mean, just when thinking through the idea of emotional intelligence, is that the one demographic of people, I think, in Kenya that really know what the public are actually feeling are witch doctors.
Which doctors?
Witch doctors. And I say that because when you go out and you see all of these things on the lampposts, on the fences, on the gates that have been put there, they know what people want. People want their homes to be secure. People want jobs. People want kazi ya UN. People want visas. People want their partners to stop playing around on them. And so the minute you go to this witch doctor and you say, my partner, the witch doctor is like, listen, I know how you feel. And instantly, you know that you're going to be handled. You'll bring him anything. He asks you for 5 white cocks that were born facing the sun when it was rising. You will bring them. You see? Witch doctors.
Which doctors?
Which doctors?
Let's hear from Dr. Wale Akinyemi. Leadership and emotional intelligence. You agree with what Dr. Njoki and Ngumi she's saying?
You've been to the witch doctors before? I don't know. That's an interesting perspective. Basically, it's a level of that person who can get people to do things that they don't necessarily enjoy doing, but they will do it because Debarl is the one, and not because Debarl is their leader. I think that's important, because some people, when we look at leadership, if you're a leader and people follow you only because there are consequences for not following you, then you're not an emotionally intelligent leader. It is when people are following you because you have made a connection with them that goes beyond the intellect. That is when you become an emotionally intelligent leader.
Thank you. Let's hear from Dr. Caesar Mwangi.
Yeah, very interesting perspectives. And I would like to just come back and say, what is a leader? First of all, a leader is a person. And if you think of a person has got intelligence, IQ, as was mentioned earlier, which is generally stable and somehow is predetermined. And a person also has a personality. You can be an introvert or an extrovert in general, which is also generally a trait which is stable over time. But emotional intelligence is something which is about your feelings and how you relate to yourself and relate to others, and that you can manage. And it is more manageable as your level of maturity increases. So a leader requires some level of maturity to be able to feel understand what he's feeling or she is feeling, and understand what others are feeling from the interactions that they have.
All right, but going by what we've seen recently, especially yesterday and the day before yesterday, where the president was addressing the governors at Naivasha during the devolution conference, right? And of course, the issue of doctors was a very ticklish issue, and he said, of course, this is it. You know, we cannot blackmail us. The tone and tenor of the president, or the deputy president recently also in Laikipia. What would you say about that, especially with the flare-ups and the anger outbursts that we've seen him really, you know, his gasket blowing recently?
Maybe the thing I can say is that I think we need to respect and meet honesty.
Yes.
Because the one thing you can tell definitely from people that are angry, it's very rare that people perform anger for a reason that they're not angry. The one legit emotion that people will perform happiness, people will perform sadness, people will go for funerals of people that they loathed and pretend to cry and, you know, say we're really sorry, and they are truly just wanting to dance on this person's grave. But at the point in time when people are angry, then they're telling the truth, and we need to listen to that. Now, the job of a leader, however, is not to come and leave the people paralyzed with the weight of their emotions. No, you need to have a solution. You need to have a solution for these feelings that you have of frustration. First of all, that it's not your frustration that you're centering at that point in time. You as the president, or you as the deputy, or you as whoever has been given responsibility, you're carrying emotions on the behalf of the 40 million of us.
Yes.
So you come and you say, yes, you're frustrated, you're angry, but then what are we going to do about that? And are you taking into account not just your own feelings and saying that this needs to end? Because also the striking doctors are tired, they're also tired, and they also want this thing to end. So when you come and say, this needs to end, I have decided, that's autocracy. At least that's what I would say. So you don't come and say, I'm tired, and then you just throw your emotions at the people of Kenya, and then you just leave them to kind of deal with, okay, also the president is tired, so now. So what is he going to do about his tiredness? And what is he going to do about ours?
Good question. Good question. And I think also that will be the basis of our discussion, because if you open it up right now, I know we'll really take much time on it. So that will be on the other side, of course, of the break, when we'll be continuing with our speeches, and of course also looking at some of the salient points that you'll have raised by then. But just to lay the groundwork, I can see it's 14 minutes to 7 o'clock. We want just to also get started with our discussion, and you also telling us what you think about leadership and emotional intelligence today. You know the rules of the game. I think the only person who is new here is Professor David Ndetei, right? So for the benefit of him, I'll just go through what we normally have, the rigors of course, the exercise. We have a yellow and a red card. This is just for the sake of timekeeping, right? And a bell as well. So midway, I give you 5 minutes each of you to speak to us and tell us what you think about emotional intelligence. Midway through your speech, I will raise a yellow card to just tell you you're midway. So don't panic and don't walk out of the lectern to go and sit thinking that you are done. Because if I raise the red, then I'm telling you it's time for you to be winding up. Then if you go overboard, of course, I'll ring the bell, right? So that's actually the long and the short of it. And of course, we'll be running your profiles as you walk to the lectern. Remember also, you have also your mics, which are, there's another mic waiting for you at the lectern. So remember just to remove your mic and place it at the back of your seat as you walk to the lectern, each of you. So we will begin with Njoki Ndongo, all right?
That's not my name, Debarl.
Ngumi.
Njoki is incredible. She's amazing, but we are not the same person.
All right, my bad. I'm sorry. Yeah, trip over my tongue there. We'll begin with you, Dr. Njoki Ngumi, as you walk to the podium to just talk to us about what you think about emotional intelligence, what emotional intelligence is. If we may just have her profile as well, as we know, she's the head of outreach and partnership at the Nest, a writer and a feminist thinker who is 1/10 of the Nest Collective and held positions in private and public healthcare sectors in Kenya. She's also director, monitoring and research at the Nest Arts Company. And give a friend, Njoki, you have 5. Let me just try and set also my stopwatch here. You have 5 minutes starting now.
I guess maybe the thing to say is that emotional intelligence is not the duty of leaders alone. I think it's important that leaders empathize with the feelings of people. I also think that it's important that people are able to gauge, is this person leading us properly? And a lot of being able to gauge that is not necessarily just performance indicators and outputs and the beautiful things that you find in monitoring and evaluation, but also, does this person listen to us when we speak? Are our views important to them? Do they care? Do they understand? Do they empathize where we're coming from? And it's only an emotionally intelligent population that will be able to tell you that a leader is failing in that particular regard. I think I want to talk about specifically the gendered implications of emotional intelligence. A lot of times women bear the brunt of people's intelligence, of people's emotions in an incredible way. You find a lot of times in homes where there's a father, that the home feels the way the father feels. And so when the father comes in with moods, then everybody scatters like cockroaches into the darkness and kind of waits for the sun to rise, and then you see that the mother is mollifying, is, trying to see, is this person feeling, and so everybody in the house is just ministering to the emotions of one person, and you find that that's how power dynamics are created, where the emotions of one person are more important than the emotions of everybody else. And so this thing where people kind of go to dump emotions on women, where when there's one woman in a board, people expect her to be the one to say exactly how people are feeling, where women are expected to do the listening, the synthesizing, the commiserating. I think we should be aware that for all the people who are, having extramarital relationships, the mistresses are doing an inordinate amount of emotional labor, because people go and get mistresses because they don't feel heard at home. So what are the mistresses doing? It's emotional labor. And so a lot of these emotional labor are things that we don't realize that we force women to do, and we assume that men are not capable of doing their own emotional labor, when in fact this isn't true. Men are very emotionally intelligent. When they're romancing you, there's high emotional intelligence there. When there's manipulation is just misuse of knowledge about emotional intelligence and knowing how people work. Maybe I can move on to practical applications of emotional intelligence. I want to talk about parents at home. We forget that parents are leaders at home, okay? And when we think about basic life skills, when you have to teach your child about sex education and things like that, a lot of parents get paralyzed by shame and then they stop. And so they abdicate their duty to somebody else to do. And so we need to start understanding that people need to take leadership at home, even in places that make them uncomfortable. I want to talk about human relations departments in places where sometimes people are, like, some of these relationships are barely human and they are rarely relational. You find a lot of these people are just there to rubber stamp the decisions that have been made above them, and we need to start moving past pretense so that people are actually listening to workers. I want to talk specifically about the space that workers are finding themselves in this country. The point of a union is that all of these negotiations are going on long before the crisis hits. And so we're finding so much crisis. There's crisis among the doctors. There's crisis among the allied electrical workers. There's crisis among the allied university workers. And it's because nobody was listening before. So now at this point, we're trying to solve the strike and not the problem, you see. So this kind of thing where we ignore the import of emotions in how people work, we're really coming to the end of that, and we need to start thinking about this before. I want to again remember that we were at a point last year when all of the children were setting fire to all of the schools. When did we have a panel like this of children to hear what they're saying? Everybody was just coming to try and solve the problem of why are children setting buildings on fire. I guess I want to talk about, as I finish, the intersections of emotional intelligence and spirituality. This understanding that the way your spiritual beliefs or lack thereof and your decisions around those things mean to you is exactly the same way that they mean to somebody else. And so when as Kenyans we decide that we know how Muslims must be feeling, how atheists must be feeling when we insult people from a place of superiority, it's a profound lack of emotional intelligence at that point in time, because we're failing kind of to understand where we're coming from as people. And maybe I will finalize by saying, in an election year, we need to stop leaders and politicians who take the mic and tell us about themselves and their problems. That's not why we elected them, you know. And so when they come, they need to tell us that they understand the place of public education, because we have been together before. If they don't know what a public school looks like, if they don't know what a public education is, then they're not going to be able to tell us anything. And so I want us to encourage more of barazas so that we can hear the people more, rather than listening and being entertained by these political grandstanding and gladiating.
Thank you, Njoki. Ngumi there. Of course, a very interesting perspective on the leadership and emotional intelligence, that we need to also have the gender implication of emotional intelligence when it comes to leadership, and women as well. Also, inordinate amount of labor when it comes to extramarital affairs. Of course, women also bear the brunt of this, and practical application of she's given us of emotional intelligence when it comes to parenthood and also abdicating duties as well. Up next, we will be speaking to, or we'll hear from Dr. Caesar Mwangi, who is currently the founding director of Center for Personal Leadership, where he has been involved in designing and delivering people and organizational improvement initiatives, and also an entrepreneur in the solar sector. Prior to this, he worked as the managing director of Susini Limited, a publicly listed agribusiness. Caesar is also a visiting lecturer and a leadership coach at the Strathmore Business School. He regularly lectures and facilitates workshops in issues related to ethical leadership, corporate governance, change management, and people effectiveness. He has a PhD in organizational performance and change management from the University of Johannesburg and an MBA from the Wits Business School in Johannesburg. He chairs the boards of the Kenya Markets Trust and Kenya School in Nairobi. He is married, of course, to Anne Wangui, and they're blessed with 5 children. We shall hear from him speaking to us on leadership and emotional intelligence. And also we're asking you, whom will you consider to be an emotional intelligent leader? Whom will you consider to be an emotional intelligent leader? You can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook. Right, we hear from Dr. Caesar. Let me just also set my stopwatch here. You have 5 minutes, beginning now.
Thank you. Good morning, Kenya. We are talking about a very critical topic today, which is emotional intelligence and leadership. And as we all know, leadership is with us. We need leaders. We need good leaders because they make a huge difference in our lives. So I want to capture this issue in 4 parts. And the first is I'd like to talk about a paradox. Emotional intelligence is critical for great leadership. But the challenge is, the higher you rise in leadership, the more difficult it is to exercise emotional intelligence. That's the paradox, what I call the unfortunate paradox. But it is so critical that leaders are aware of the need to have emotional intelligence. Now, what is emotional intelligence? Very quickly, it's about 4 skills, 4 issues which you need to manage. And you need to be aware as a leader that these are so critical to your success because even research has proved that they are critical. One is self-awareness. You need to be aware of who you are. Very, very, very basic terms. Who am I? Am I aware of myself and how I'm feeling at this particular point in time? That's very important. Second, once you're aware, you can then manage yourself and start saying, how will I react to a particular situation? That is self-management. And sometimes I like to call this personal leadership, leading yourself, very, very critical. You cannot lead others unless you can first lead yourself. Let's first be very clear about that, because we seem to have this notion, and I call it fragmented thinking, that you can lead others and yet you cannot lead yourself. You cannot do that. It is not possible. The other issue that you need to remember is, apart from managing yourself, having a self-awareness, a self-management, you need now to think of the others. You are leading other people. You are in the public eye. So you've got to have social awareness. What is happening around me? Who are the people I'm dealing with? And how are they feeling? How are they thinking? What do they feel about me? So being aware of those people around you. And the fourth is, therefore, now that I'm aware of those people around me, how can I manage those people around me? By the way I communicate, the way I interact with them. So really 4 things about leading yourself and about leading others in very broad terms. Now, the reason why it is so important is that it is also linked to a very important aspect of a human being's evolution, which is maturity. We say small children are not mature, therefore we don't give them too much responsibility. But as we grow and we become adults, we become mature. And that's why we have more responsibility. And leaders have a huge responsibility. And therefore, we have to be aware that as we grow, we have to be mature. And mature people generally have emotional intelligence because they understand how to cope in certain situations. I'll just give you a simple example. Some of the coping mechanisms for in maturity are very simply things like altruism, where you focus on the needs of others. That's a mature response to being a mature person. You want to deal with other people's issues and resolve them. That's altruism. And you think of all the great leaders, they have a high level of altruism. Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Julius Nyerere, Mother Teresa, huge level of altruism because they are highly mature people. The other coping mechanism or adaptability mechanism in maturity is humor, for example. You may find a situation is very tense, but you realize in this situation of tension, you need to crack a joke. That's a way of exercising part of your responsibility as a mature leader, as a mature person. You can also delay your reactions or suppress your immediate reaction to a particular situation. And that means that you've actually put your mind in gear, realize the situation may be a bit tense, and you delay your response to that situation, and you hold back. Sometimes we say, if you're very angry, wait for 24 hours before reacting. Okay? And another one is perhaps anticipating reactions from other people, and from that anticipation, realizing that something may be very bad in the future, therefore, let me plan for it early enough. Now, that's maturity, and that requires a high level of self-awareness of who we are and what our impact is on other people. Apart from the maturity level, we have emotional intelligence very much linked to the concept of decision making. As a leader, we are called upon to make difficult decisions, challenging decisions because they affect the lives of so many other people. And therefore, we have to be aware of who we are, being self-aware of ourselves, and have emotional intelligence in that regard. Because if we don't have that emotional intelligence, we might operate our decision making based on our instincts, for example. You know, fight or flight. Okay? And that is a quick reaction which is based on our somehow animal instinct, which is very basic to us. a lot of leaders operate on this level of instinct, where there's a huge level of focus on accumulation, for example, and anger. Sometimes that happens. But we can also make our decisions based on values, which are important to us, and that requires more emotional intelligence. In closing, my dear friends, I think we need to understand emotional intelligence is critical. It's critical for leadership. Most important, research has proved that the higher the level of emotional intelligence, the more effective you are as a leader. And therefore, we need to think about this concept and inculcate it in ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Caesar Mwangi there. And of course, we will pick on those solid points that he's raised this morning and given you also the attributes of a good emotionally intelligent leader. First of all, the aspect of altruism, humor, delaying your reactions, anticipating, and also concept of decision making is very critical also if you are in leadership. The unfortunate paradox that he talks about, the higher that you go in the scale or the ranks of leadership, upper ranks of leadership also, the much more emotional intelligence you need. Also we'll look about that, the self-awareness, the self-management, and the rest that he mentioned also we'll look keenly into. Right, up next we have Dr. Vincent Ogutu, who is acting Deputy Vice Chancellor, Planning and Development at the Strathmore University. He is a full-time lecturer in organizational behavior, leadership, and entrepreneurship. He has also a PhD in organizational management from Rutgers Business School, USA, an MSc in financial economics from the University of London, and a BA in economics from the University of Nairobi. He uses his research in psychology of meaningful work and social entrepreneurship to help organizations create meaningful work environment for their employees. Also, he's passionate about reforming the education system. Well, I mentioned earlier, he's a Fulbright scholar at the United States, where he had the scholarship in 2009 to 2014. Also, he has given talks at TEDx talks at IESE Barcelona in 2016. Vincent, let me just set also my stopwatch here. You have 5 minutes, starting now.
Good morning, dear Kenyans. Thank you, Caesar and Njoki, for an inspiring talk and setting the stage so that everyone understands what we're talking about when we say emotional intelligence. I want to start with leadership, what leadership is. Caesar also gave you an idea of what leadership is. I try to distinguish it from management. It's true that leaders have to manage as well, but a leader essentially inspires people. A leader gets people to want to do the right thing, to want to actually achieve that vision. So it's a much tougher job than being a manager. With being a manager, you might just set the goals, tell them what the incentives are, what the punishments are, and then say go, and then keep an eye on them and see what they're doing. But with a leader, you're trying to get inside the minds of people. You're trying to get inside their hearts. You want them to believe that vision, to employ an inordinate amount of energy and effort to make it happen. And that doesn't come easily. It means that they have to buy into that vision that you're talking to them about. And for them to buy into it, you have to sell it to all of them. They're not just rational, as we said earlier. They don't just make decisions based on how interesting it is. They look at their emotions as well. Do they love it? Do they hate it? Do they like you? Do they dislike you? All these things come into play. And so when you're trying to inspire people, you really want to understand their emotions. Let's talk a little bit about emotions. We are emotional people. We display and see all kinds of emotions. We see anger, envy. We see people being patient, impatient. We see humor. We see sadness. We see joy. There are all kinds of emotions that we see all the time. And it's important for us to be able to interpret them. And then it's also important for us to be able to match emotion for emotion. So imagine you go to a funeral and you choose that to be your moment of humor and you're cracking jokes. It's totally inappropriate. You will not communicate with the people there. That's the moment for you to put on that serious look, that look of compassion. You're matching emotion for emotion. People are suffering and you are showing them compassion. And then if you're going to this party and you have this funeral look on your face, then it just doesn't match. It doesn't work. So you have to match emotion for emotion. People are excited, they're happy, they're laughing, and you've got to blend in. And that's emotional intelligence, knowing how to match the emotions that you meet with the appropriate emotion that will then make you blend and will make everything work for you. Now, as a leader, you're going to get into a lot of meetings with people, one-on-ones, and you'll be trying to sell that vision to them. How are you going to do it? You have to understand them really well. So let's talk a bit about understanding emotions so that you understand yourself and you can meet other people's emotions with the right emotion yourself. Self-knowledge is key here, as Caesar told us. Self-knowledge is very, very important. Even Socrates himself makes that his biggest lesson. When you join his academy, he tells you, know thyself. That's the first thing that you have to know. If you can understand yourself, your own feelings, you will be able to motivate yourself. You will be able to motivate others. So the first thing is to know yourself, and then you can begin to understand how other people react as well, because you have a deep understanding of emotions at a personal level. So how do you get to know yourself? It's not so easy, but it takes some courage. You have to, first of all, want to do it. The payoff is amazing. If you get to know yourself, that's the biggest favor you'll do yourself. So the payoff is amazing. That's great motivation to know yourself. Secondly, you need to be very humble, because when you're trying to know yourself, you have to look in the mirror. And the mirror in this case is other people, the feedback they give you. So depending on how they react to you, the things they tell you, you will get to know yourself quite well. You will know exactly what you did. In fact, Njoki told us how, as a dad coming home in a bad mood, you set the mood for everyone else. So you look at how people are reacting and you see how you are. So try to know yourself, try to know others, look for a framework that will help you to know others and to know yourself, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you're analytical or laid back. Try to look at those dualities, place yourself in the spectrum, and you'll get to know yourself better. And then lastly, care for people. The reason why we want to be emotionally intelligent is in order to lead them to a better place. So if you are driven by that desire to lead them to a better place, they'll trust you. And you can actually have even a bit of latitude in case you make a mistake. If you don't win their trust, then it's very hard for you to do that. So all the very best on your emotional intelligence journey.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vincent Ogutu there. And of course, it's very key to get to understand yourself, understanding your emotions. First of all, self-knowledge is very critical, as he mentioned. Also, humility is a key component in discovering this and being an emotionally intelligent leader and caring for people as well. Up next, we have Professor David Ndetei. Professor Ndetei is a professor of psychiatry at the University of Nairobi and also the founding director of Africa Mental Health Foundation, a non-governmental organization dedicated to research for evidence-based policy and practice in mental health and promotion of neurological health and healthy behavior. His passion is research to generate evidence for policy and best practice in the provision of affordable, appropriate, available, and accessible mental health services for all. He is a current chair of the African Division of the Royal College of Psychiatry and World Psychiatry Association, Zone 14, that is Eastern or East Central and South Africa. And also he has served as a principal investigator for nearly all Kenyan published clinical and community epidemiological studies in mental health. You have, as I set my stopwatch right now, you have 5 minutes beginning now, sir.
Good morning, Kenyans. I'll be very brief and I'll use very simple analogies. I'm surprised how we all think alike from different perspectives. To me, leadership is characterized by one or two things, maybe four. I think number one, leadership is about the ability to remove the log in your eye before you can see the speck or the specks in the people that you lead. That's very, very fundamental, and I think basically that's what my predecessors have just said. Leadership is about Me borrowing your specs, you borrowing my specs, putting on your specs, my specs, so that you can see the world the way I see it. It's not just the way I see the world while I'm wearing my specs, but I also want other people, I also want to borrow the specs of other people so that I can see the way they see things. Leadership is about the ability to use your 2 ears many more times than you use this, than you use your mouth. Leadership is about seeing other people's needs much more than you see your own. Leadership is about the good of other people. In summary, leadership is about dialogue. The problem that I see in our country is that many of our leaders don't have those qualities. But I'm also very keen not to judge people, because behavior is contextualized. How you behave depends on the circumstances. I'll give you good examples. We've seen people who organize strikes in universities and other situations. When they're in a different situation, they behave in a slightly different way. Another example is people who participate in mob justice, and we tend to participate in mob justice. Those people, when they're in that particular context, they behave in a certain way in which they would never behave in a particular way. If I go to a disco, start dancing, and then I come to the streets and I start dancing, that is inappropriate. So, as we see our leaders, let's try to understand the context in which they behave, the way they behave, and let us all have dialogue. And I think we have dialogue. There are plenty of good ideas. People mean well for other people. The problem is that we never get to communicate, to understand the good those other people mean for us and the good we mean for them. Are we able to do that? If we are able to do that, then we'll be providing leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. David Ndetei, Professor David Ndetei there from the University of Nairobi. Up next, we'll be listening from Dr. Wale Akinyemi. Wale Akinyemi is the CEO of Power Talks Limited, a corporate and personal development consulting firm registered in Kenya, where he also serves as a lead consultant, trainer, facilitator. He is a graduate of demography and social statistics, and he has over 20 years of working with companies and individuals in different parts of the world. Also, I'll set my stopwatch. Starting now, Dr. Wale, thank you.
Thank you very much. One mistake I don't think we should make is to confuse the word leadership with the person who holds a title. Because I've worked in so many organizations over the last 20-something years, and you find there's somebody who has the title, but then there's somebody else who has the power. You could have a great title and all that, but you're not able to move the people in a particular direction. And then, find somebody else there. And that other person may be so many levels lower than you. You may be the manager, and the person that has the power may be the receptionist. And this is something I've seen. So I now began to study, what is it that gives people that kind of power to be able to move people? Because, you see, emotional leadership is a leadership that inspires motion. So when you remove the E, you have motion. So empowered to move.
Now, so I ask a lot of people when we, have workshops for them on this particular topic, and I want to ask everybody, think of that person that you will go out of your way to do anything for. That person that you will go out of your way to help succeed, not because they have any authority over you, but because you just like them. You just want to help them succeed. Now, and 100% of the time, the kind of responses I get, I tell people, write down the attributes of that person. What are the responses I get? Somebody who cares for me. Somebody who listens to me. Somebody who helps me. And very interestingly, I rarely get people say somebody who is a genius, who is brilliant. I rarely get people say somebody who went to Harvard, who has this title. No. So that means we can all be emotionally intelligent, and it will not cost you a dime. How? Listen to people. Care for people. The simple thank you, please. Those are very, very simple things. Show a genuine interest in people. When you do that, then remember the list I said you should make of the attributes of the people you would do anything for that they have. Then you now become one of those people. So you see, the fact that you occupy an office is not what makes you a leader. The fact that you have a title is not what makes you a leader. If you're a leader and nobody is following you, you are just taking a walk. If you're a leader, you think you're a leader and people are following you because there are consequences for not following you. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about you being able to move people. You being able to inspire, to empower motion. And the way to do that is to listen, to care, and just be a good person to other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wale Akinyemi there. Listen, care, be there for other people. Leadership that inspire, motion that is all about emotional intelligence or intelligent leadership, empowering people, caring for people, listening to people. So we want to now drill deeper to what this panelists have talked to us this morning about. Remember also you can chime in, you can call us, our numbers will be up momentarily, or you can also tweet us. We have 1 or 2 tweets. I can see also a rush of tweets. I can read some of them for you this morning, just to also set the tone on that front. Remember you can use the hashtag AMLiveNTV. We have John Githanga saying, a word of advice to Kenyan politicians. There's a big difference between lies and politics. Also, we have Engineer Matete saying exactly good morning there. He appreciates what the panelists are doing. That's why I like there we have mature panelists. That is what Kahiriken is saying. Also, Samuel Orutu saying leadership is an ability to possess skills of solving their problems in satisfying way acceptable to them to move forward. And we have Kevin saying you also need to point out the difference between influence and manipulation in a leader. So remember to use the hashtag AMLiveNTV. Lots of them, we shall be reading them much later in the course of the program. But now we want to get to discuss what our panelists have talked about this morning. And we'll begin with what Njoki Ngumi was highlighting, especially I should say, the gender implication of emotional intelligence. You want to expand a bit on this because right. I think you highlighted it. What do you especially mean when we talk about gender implication of EQ?
I mean that women are usually expected to carry the emotions of people, that they're expected to be repositories yes. for the emotions of people. So somebody is going to be feeling some type of way, and then regardless of whether they're a man or a woman, the person that they expect to understand them is a woman, and they'll actually get upset when a woman doesn't understand what they're feeling. You know what I mean? So someone is just going to have all these things, and then they come, and so if you come and you're angry with a woman, she should understand. Like this whole idea that your feelings are safe with a woman, whether she cares for you or not, whether she's invested in your outcome or not, whether, like, regardless of your relationship with her, because she's a woman, she should understand. This, juu yeye ni mwanamke, she'll understand. That she'll understand is the issue for me. So it makes us feel that men are not emotionally intelligent, which I don't think is true, because all human beings have to be emotionally intelligent at different points in time in order to be able to get the kinds of reactions that they want from people, to be able to get other people to understand them, etc. But this idea that women are better with feelings in general, or the things for feelings achia wanawake, that's the issue with the gendered implications of emotional intelligence, that we expect women to have it on behalf of everybody, the same way that we expect women to carry the morals of the entire society, but men can go out and do what they want.
Right, so can we really truly have a 360, an entire circle of scope when it comes to maturity and emotional intelligence? Because you can be having a certain degree of maturity in certain area, but you are completely a mess on other segments, maybe of maturity, so to speak. Can someone be well-rounded? And you say truly, because you mentioned names, Mahatma Gandhi, some of his gurus that we know.
Yeah.
Would we say that there were 100% or 360 leaders who had emotional intelligence?
Yeah. Let me comment on that question. A human being a person is about the being. A leader is about who he is or who she is. It's about who you are. And as much as we want to conquer the academic field, we want to conquer the political field, the most important field you must conquer is yourself. You understand? And if you look at those great leaders, they made great effort to work on themselves and their emotional intelligence and their understanding of themselves and their understanding of life and their understanding of other people and the needs of other people. So somehow you've got to forget yourself. Vincent mentioned the concept of humility.
Yes.
It is a challenge for many leaders to be humble, simply because their egos have grown too big. But you need humility for greatness. That's a paradox. And that is a challenge which the great leaders have managed to overcome. And so there is nobody who is perfect. Everybody is work in progress. Even Mandela was work in progress. Every great leader is a work in progress. We are all work in progress.
Right. We've seen in this country the issue, and any of you can chime in, we don't have to go really sequentially, where the leaders who have certain traits, right, maybe they're soft-spoken, they don't seem to be very charismatic and abrasive, and we say, no, that is not a sort of a leader that we want to be a public leader. Yet, are we really missing out on some aspects of emotional intelligence when we sideline some people because they come across as very soft-spoken, they're not very decisive in making decisions, or they slow up their uptake in making decisions?
I think we need to stop confusing softness.
Yes.
And somebody who's more gently oriented to emotional intelligence, because you can be gentle and not emotionally intelligent at all. So you're just there being gentle, but the situation is calling for a stronger reaction, or the situation is calling for you to react in a different way. So the thing that emotional intelligence is responsive. It is responsiveness. And so I don't think we should call emotionally intelligent, we should say that someone who got angry in public is not emotionally intelligent. I don't think that's true. I think you're allowed to be angry. It's just how you're angry that now shows whether you're emotionally intelligent or not. Are you going to be insulting people?
Yes.
Are you going to be calling their mothers names?
Yes.
Or are you going to be naming the issue, and are you going to be giving people a solution also, instead, like referencing the thing that I said earlier about giving people the weight of your emotions to carry and then abandoning them with that paralysis of now dealing with a leader's anger. We were talking earlier with Daktari here, and he was saying that when a leader enters a boardroom and they're upset, the entire meeting just kind of takes on that energy and that tone. So realizing that as a leader you have the responsibility of carrying the tone for many, is that responsiveness.
All right, I want to go back to the tone and tenor of the president as well, because you've mentioned, of course, you can see the outburst of anger And you say when it comes to a room, of course, having that particular negative vibe, I should say, or anger, it will always be picked by some people. When you have a president who we take to be, the apex of his country, the epicenter, holding the country together, and the sort of outrage that we can see, and him also calling people names, what would be your reactions when it comes, to, you say we need to uncouple emotional intelligence and also outbursts of anger?
I think anger is not necessarily a bad thing, and that's why we actually have it. We're supposed to use it in certain situations. If you're a father or mother and the little child does something that's potentially dangerous for them, you've got to display a certain amount of anger and impatience for them to get the message. You might even find it laughable, but you know that for their own sake you have to wear a serious face and put on a harsh tone, because that's totally appropriate to get the message across. Now, unfortunately, anger can be used as a reaction where you just don't know how to cope and then you have an outburst. Sometimes it can be used defensively. They say the best form of attack is defense, so some people might come out defensively and say, no, it's the others who did this and did that. So anger can be used in different ways, but I think you should look for moments when it's legitimate. You have won the trust of the people, you have done everything possible, and you've been let down. So if it's true that the president has done everything possible, then his anger is justified. If he hasn't done everything possible, and in fact, by him seeing the mood of the people in Turkana and seeing how they're reacting negatively to him, he should ask himself, have I done everything that I possibly could? And then decide how to react. So in this case, he might be acting defensively, who knows? It all depends on whether we can say that we trust that he has done everything possible and this is his reaction.
All right. Yeah, let's hear from Professor as well.
Yeah, let me look at the two issues of anger and charisma. Number one, anger. There is nothing inherently wrong with all types of anger. Even Jesus Christ was extremely angry and he drove people from the temple. Jesus Christ was very angry with some of the Pharisees, not because of what they were doing to him, but what they were doing to other people. So if anger is supposed to be on behalf of other people who cannot express themselves, then that is justified anger. Call it holy anger. Anger becomes a problem when you are angry because you are not being recognized, when it becomes selfish. But if it's anger on behalf of helpless people, we need that kind of anger in this country, because our people, many of them, have been totally mistreated. Charisma is not necessarily a sign of leadership. Again, if you are charismatic because you want to lead people in a way that is selfish, then there's a problem. Hitler was a very charismatic leader. What did he do to the world? Do we want that kind of charisma? We want charisma that is in the best interest of people who are helpless. If we can achieve that, then we are using charisma in a good way. So charisma, anger, depends on how you look at them. Depends on the context.
All right. We have callers, Dr. Vincent, before we come to you. Just briefly hold on to that. We have Simon who's hanging on the line. Calling from Bungoma. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Debarl.
Morning to you. You have a question or contribution from a panelist, very briefly, sir.
First, I want to thank the panel for that wonderful conversation.
Yes, thank you.
And I want to comment that we become emotionally destabilized when we feel threatened. When we want to pass out a message and we feel that we've not done it the best we think we could,
yes,
then we feel threatened. Then we put the emotional, that kind of reflection of anger to suppress the person so that we coerce them to accept what we are saying when we are felt threatened. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Let's hear from Dr. Vincent.
First of all, what Simon said is so true. That's what I was referring to by saying the best form of attack is defense. So sometimes people can just react in an angry way in order to silence you, as Simon so very well put it. I wanted to address the charisma issue here because I think people have this belief that the best leaders are charismatic, that unless you're charismatic, you can't be a leader. And Professor Ndetei said it's not true. You don't have to be charismatic. Charisma can be used for good or for bad. I think the main thing, apart from competence, of course, knowing what you should do as a leader, is trust. You have to win people's trust. You can win it with charisma or cheat them with charisma. But I think the bottom line is, if you're a good person, if you keep your promises, and people believe you will keep your promises, they'll follow you. If they see that you mean well for them, that you're doing everything in order to help them and to get them to a better place. That's all it takes. So you don't have to be a good public speaker. You don't have to be charismatic. All you have to be is honest and, as Wale said, to care.
To care.
If you can signal that you honestly care, you're doing your best for them, you don't have to be charismatic. That's all you need.
Well, let's hear from you, Dr. Wale, charisma, because I think that the metrics we have in this country and to many people where we cannot really uncouple charisma and a leader. If a person has the gift of gab, is well-spoken, you know, you're silver-tongued, very eloquent, you're very vibrant, vivacious, aggressive, then you are taken to be a good leader. Is it necessarily, what do you say, charisma and public leadership, they go together?
Charisma can help, but it's not a prerequisite. I'll give you an example. You all remember the Iranian Revolution. Ayatollah Khomeini was not even in Iran. You know, so where was the charisma? He was in exile. And yet, there was a revolution that brought him to power. And remember, there was no email, there was no YouTube, there was nothing. So where did the strength and force of his leadership come from? It came from his ideology. You know, so we don't have to be charismatic. You know, we know about the four sources of power. Where does power come from? The person that controls the money, the person that controls ideology, which is why churches are very powerful, the person that controls, that has the hearts and minds of people, and finally, the person that has access to violence. Now, if you have access to those four, you don't need to be charismatic. You know, so we should not confuse emotional intelligence with charisma. They are two different things. And again, intelligence is not about the decibels, how loud you speak. No, you can be very, very soft-spoken and very, very powerful. And talking about the president, you know, sometimes anger may be the emotionally intelligent way. Sometimes, you know, because it's basically knowing the emotion that will get the job done. Sometimes, like Prof said, Jesus went into the temple and whipped everybody out. So sometimes that might be the way forward.
And that is not necessarily sin, as so many people think. The outburst of anger, that is sin, that you need to repent. Even the good book says, yeah, you should be angry, but don't wait for the sun to go down with your anger as well. Yeah?
I think, though, I think it's important to note the dark side of using emotional intelligence to get people to do something. And I guess that's what somebody who had tweeted referenced as manipulation. And so if I came here...
manipulation is witchcraft.
No, you know, but no. I mean, we can get into that conversation another day because we're dealing with because there's many things,
off that conversation.
There's many things with regard to witchcraft that it's the understanding, but it's also the harnessing of powers that are beyond the things that we can see, and that, I think, is a conversation for another day. For now, we're talking about emotional intelligence. And for instance, if I know the things that drive Daktari,
yes,
and I can reference them to get him to do a thing for me, that is manipulation. Okay? And when we use that sort of thing with interpersonal relationships, with in contexts at work, where I want to get him to do a thing that may not necessarily be in his interest, but is in mine, and then I succeed, then what I'm doing is manipulating. I'm not I'm not considering him. I'm not considering his context. I'm not even attempting to reach a compromise that will make both of us happy. I'm just being a puppeteer. The other thing that I wanted to say, and I guess it was what Simon mentioned in the call when he talked about threats.
Yes.
Is I mean, we're dealing with an inordinate amount of abuse in homes in this country and with interpartner violence, okay? And a lot of times when that happens, somebody is reacting within an emotional crisis. And then when all of the abuse is over, you'll find everybody is now coming to cover this person. So everybody is going to come and say, no, don't leave this person, give this person another chance. Everybody is gathering, even the person themselves will come and say, I'll kill myself if you leave me. You know, things like that. And all of that is just, it's just more manipulation. And so when we talk about the knowledge of emotional intelligence, it is knowing that when I insult this person in that way, when I insult his mother, and his mother is the most important thing to him, when I insult his work, and his work is the most important thing to him, I know I'm hurting them. That is emotional intelligence. And we're saying that we need to use the knowledge of how people feel for their good and not for their detriment.
All right, we'll come to you, Dr. Wale. But also we need to predicate, I think you've raised, because all of you, when had you talking about, listening, communication skills is very key, also reaching out to others. You talked about altruism, caring for others, Dr. Wale said. Could we maybe try and, because I think also Daniel Coleman did a very seminal work on emotional intelligence, where he actually came up with this particular word, borrowing also from John D. Mayer and also Peter Solovey of Yale University. And they came with the 5 components of emotional intelligence. Maybe we can summarize all this. When you talk about self-awareness, you're talking about self-regulation, motivation, empathy for others, social skills, such as proficiency in managing relationships and building networks as well. Even as we're going towards a general election, should we make sure as Kenyans that aside from issues of ethical and integrity, sort of the other side of leadership, when it comes to emotional intelligence, this should be the metrics that we run through the rigors, or run through our leaders through the rigors of these 5 components that we have given out by Daniel Coleman. Let's hear from, we'll come to, let's hear from Dr. Caesar.
Yeah, you mentioned the reality that we're going towards elections, and we have to elect leaders, and we have to choose them on certain criteria. And is emotional intelligence one of those most important criteria?
Yes.
One, I want to point out that our leaders are highly emotionally intelligent, but in a manipulative manner, because they gather their popularity through their affiliation to their tribes. Okay? And they know that their people live in a certain fear that there are other bigger tribes or other dangerous tribes or other tribes with certain characteristics, and therefore they manipulate those people, and that is emotional intelligence.
Yes.
But it is a misuse of emotional intelligence. Ultimately, what we should be judging our leaders by is, yes, emotional intelligence, but for the common good, not for a selfish interest. And unfortunately in this country, too much selfish interest has prevailed in the use of emotional intelligence. And perhaps this is where we need a very keen voter education process to start getting people to understand what is manipulation and what is being done for the good of the ordinary person, the common good, the greater good. Because right now we're a very fragmented society,
Yes.
tragically.
Okay, let's hear from Dr. Wale.
Talking of the politicians, my question is, I talked about being good, just being good, and I am very, very particular about how you treat people that you think that you are better than. How you treat people that, on the face of it, have nothing to give you. Now that, I think, is the true measure of how emotionally intelligent you are. Simple things I tell my daughter, I said, if a guy takes you out and you get to a restaurant and he doesn't say the 2 magic words to the waiter, please, can I have some water? And the waiter brings the water and he doesn't say thank you. You got to put that person on a watch list, because these are very, very, very simple things. And so the question about the politicians is, are they this nice and charming when they don't need something from the people. Now they are in churches, man. Now they are dancing in public. They are dancing, looking like they enjoy it. And it reminds me of once when there was a court case that I had to attend with someone in the United States. And the lawyer said, when you get to this point, make sure you cry. Okay? And that happens all the time, you know? And when we got to that point, the person cried, you know, and they won the case. That is how our politicians are behaving today. I totally agree. There needs to be massive voter education because, unfortunately, people are being hoodwinked by a lot of these things.
All right. All right, Dr. Vincent, just hold on to it. We have two callers who are hanging on the line, then we'll come to you. Let's hear from Wakio this morning. Good morning, Wakio. How are you?
Very fine. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you have a contribution for our panelists this morning, very briefly, sir.
Yes, I have a contribution to make on the very important topic that is currently under discussion.
Yes.
Thank you, Debarl, and also to thank the panelists. My only comment basically is sometimes when also at the leadership level, when there's an expression of anger, it is important also to know who are the consumers of that anger, who are the people ideally that will be affected by the anger. Because one of the panelists did mention that in a family setting, yes, you may want to express this so that you can pass a specific message. But again, at another leadership, the same anger cannot be expressed if one is occupying a higher office, which is, say, the presidency, or could be maybe the governor, because at the end of the day, there are many interpretations. So you may not necessarily achieve what you wanted to pass across to your audience. I speak this because sometimes there's a temptation by the scholars to basically describe anger in a manner that you may find somebody is describing it simply because he has a specific person or in mind. Let's say you're describing anger because you know the president, or you know the governor, or you know someone else. But I think it's important when in such a forum when we can describe.
All right, thank you.
The constant cause.
Thank you, Makio. There also we have another caller, Joe, hanging on the line. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Joe.
Yeah, morning.
A contribution.
Yeah, morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity.
All right, we seem to have lost Joe. Let's just continue. We've got the gist of what Simon is saying. Before we actually picked Simon, we were on you. I hope you've not lost your track of thought.
No, I haven't. And in fact, I can weave it into what Mwakio is saying about anger and knowing your audience. So I think when the president was expressing his frustration at things not happening, that's good anger. But when he then says that the world will go on without you people, whether you vote for me or not, that's now probably not, because you have to look at your audience.
And when he insults, because also he insulted.
We didn't see that part, but...
we had that part.
Okay,
we can actually play that part as well.
Yes, so I think in that part, he should play the role of being a conciliatory person. You're the president of the entire country. You don't want to alienate anyone. You don't want to make them feel like I can do without you, I can live without you, I don't care. You really want to bring everyone together and to empathize with the problems that are there and to direct your anger at the people who are stopping that development from happening. So then just quickly coming to what you said about the 360s. Is there a 360-degree way of looking at emotional intelligence? I think there is. Unfortunately, those who are not emotionally intelligent go into situations with overconfidence. Their first interpretation of what's going on is what they go with, and they act as if their interpretation is correct. They don't stop to listen to the others and see why the others might be acting in a way that they don't think makes sense. So in order to see things properly, you have to do what Prof. Ndetei was saying about putting on their glasses and seeing the world through their eyes. I think of it as wearing their shoes. And my first assumption is that everyone is logical and everyone means well and is driven by a good motive. So if I can get into their shoes, if I can see the world through their eyes, I might begin to see where the logic that's driving them is coming from. In which case, I will be less harsh with them. I will first of all acknowledge their concerns and how they see the world, and then gradually draw them to see the world the way I'm seeing it and bring it all together. With the elections, as you're saying, part of the problem is we don't take the time to put ourselves in the other's shoes. So I'm a Luo, for instance. So the typical thing might be to say, well, the Kikuyus don't want to let go of power, they're just selfish, and I can be super confident about that and treat them that way and not address their fears at all. But if I put myself in their shoes and then I see how they might genuinely be afraid of us and think these people might be vengeful and they might think we stole from them, they might want to revenge. And so I understand where the fear is coming from. Now, if I start from a position of wearing their shoes, then I no longer just condemn them wholesale. I'll come and say, let's talk. Not all of us want to revenge.
Thank you.
Not all of us think you're thieves. And then we begin a conversation.
Thank you. Right.
I think,
yes.
Can I say something brief? And I guess I want to reference something that Professor Ndetei has said over and over again. And he's an expert on mental health, and so he will know that there's a difference, okay, between expressing your emotions and venting. There's a way in which when the president says you people can just, that's venting. And so the thing we have to ask ourselves is who is the intermediary between him and the people who will receive his first vent, such that by the time he goes to the people, he doesn't have to say that thing because he has already said it. Okay? And when the other thing that we need to think about is what happens when people begin to burn out. Right? People have been in leadership for this period of time. There's all manner of reasons, and they're multi-layered, very complex, very deep, very old, and we can go into those things another day. But there can be a number of frustrations associated with being at the top and still having limits to your power. You can write a thing, and then people will still just not take it up. You can have all these beautiful policies, and then applying them becomes the problem. And so you come and you say, literally, I think I'm doing all that I can. And then you leave the people with that feeling. But then again, the people he needs to be angriest with are not the people on the ground, because they're receiving all of these things. The people he needs to be angriest with are the people in his government, the people who have the power to do the things that he's asking them to do, and they're not doing it. And so if you're just angry with them also, but they're not doing their jobs and you're not firing them, then we need to ask you questions. But also we need to start questioning ourselves about who is the president and who are leadership's emotional supports, such that by the time they're going to communicate their vision to the people, they're even. They're not coming with inflammatory, acute reactions.
Thank you. As we're winding up, I just want us to, 30 seconds. We can also, I think, Njoki also raised a very important point, especially with the handover strikes, industrial strikes that we had in this country. The lack of import of emotions into how we react to this situation. Do you think in any way it has exacerbated what the industrial strike has come to be in this country? Very briefly, as we're winding up, just think about
yes,
this.
I definitely think that the lack of emotional intelligence on the part of the leaders who are involved in the negotiations has affected the outcome of this strike.
Yes.
And it has affected millions of Kenyans, unfortunately. And that is why leaders really need to understand the huge responsibility they have and the impact of their actions. In this case, I can categorically state that there was a lack of emotional intelligence on both parties. And this has led to the paralysis of the medical sector and death to many people and suffering to very many people. Tragically so.
All right, Dr. Ndetei.
Njoki has been raising a point and we have ignored it. She has been talking about the families.
Yes.
As we talk about emotional intelligence with the leaders affecting those of us who are voters 18 and above, what about those more than half of the population who are below 18 years? We need emotional intelligence more in the families than we need it out there. And I think this is very important. We should not ignore that.
All right, thank you. Dr. Vincent.
Regarding the doctor's issue, I agree with Caesar that there are faults on both sides. On the government side for not understanding and being able to just create an understanding. And then I think also on the doctor's side, because if they had played this out better, they would have won the support of the whole country. I saw a tweet the other day that was saying that these doctors will go to their private practice as much as they might seem to be on strike, so then they don't inspire enough pity from the people because they say it's fake, it's not really, they're not under duress. So if they had played it right, they could probably have won the support of people.
All right.
I think
Dr.
we need to
Njoki?
realize, especially about the doctors, but about all these allied workers who are on the strikes, that they're working in deeply dysfunctional systems, and that these frustrations have actually gotten to the roof and they can't deal with them anymore. So you're trying to get perfect work done in an imperfect system, and it is impossible. You're too few, you don't have enough resources, and people still expect you to cook a 7-course meal when you only have a packet of unga.
Thank you.
You see? And so some of these reactions are because of being unable to cope with these situations. The other thing I want to say is, with regard to reaching the end of these things, I have not had one single person from the Ministry of Health, from leadership, even this clergy who are supposed to come and solve this problem, saying that they understand what the doctors feel.
Thank you,
so
Dr. Wale.
that there's been a lack there.
Thank you. Dr. Wale, briefly.
I guess what I'm going to say will probably stir up some more for some other day. But I have seen that the more academically intelligent a person is, many times the less emotionally intelligent they are.
And that's the paradox he was talking about. Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady. We really do appreciate it. And I think also, Dr. Njoki, this also is in tandem with what you were saying. Yeah. Looking at what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation, I think is diametrically different with what we have also on the touchscreens today. Wife hired us to kill her husband. That is what he is a splash. And we were talking about leadership and emotional intelligence, also emotional intelligence in the family as well. I really do appreciate your input this morning coming through. Thank you very much also for your valued company.